Good Monday morning, everybody, and I hope you're having a good President's Day. I'm Eric, as usual, back with Gearheaddaily. Usually, I try to bring you something fun, interesting, or just, enraging in the car world. And today, I have something called the 2001 Ford Lightning Concept somebody's selling in Arizona. And I want to talk to you about how concept vehicles work, technically, sometimes how you can buy them, why they're hard to find, and usually why they aren't worth a whole lot of money. So let's go through the ad and I'll tell you exactly my experience with concept cars and why they may not be the best buy out there for a lot of reasons. Okay, so this person is selling a 2001, a Ford Lightning Concept. Looks like a Lightning, sort of, kind of like the cross between like a Contour and a truck of sorts, so like a smoothed out Ranger with a front end of a car. But let's take a look. Usually these cars are done fairly nicely to look nice. It looks nice, don't get me wrong. I mean, it looks nice. Here we go. Interior looks like it's done okay. I mean, if it's a concept car from 20 years ago, it's gonna look a little dated, but that's to be expected. Details look nice. I question though whether these grills here are functional. They don't look functional, and it looks okay. It looks fine. It looks like it hasn't driven very much. And as soon as we go to the description, what you'll find, it has less than 100 miles on it. So let's go through what they're selling, which is Ford Lightning Concept, produced in 2001 for the auto show circuit, debuted in Chicago as a concept of what the next generation could be. It's not meant to be driven on the street. Key, not meant to be driven on the street. Okay, he alludes to this, but here's some realities about owning a concept vehicle. Okay, you can't drive them on the street. They come without a VIN. That's your big ticket. It does not have a VIN on it. Okay, this is a collector car that, like a running operable truck with less than 100 miles. It's a showpiece. You put it in a museum, and that's all you do. Okay, it does run and function, but some items are just for show. Seat belts, air vents. Okay, proves my point. Air vents and a bunch of other things are just for show and don't actually work. Okay. Lightning rod concept. Okay, lots of articles. Okay, here's the deal. Most concept cars are made to look pretty. Like this one, it's made to look pretty, outwardly nice to show the public, but it doesn't have to work. So generally when you get these things, the fit and finish is nice, but as soon as you open the hood, for example, they tend to be pretty junky. Like nobody pays any attention to the motor, the running gear, because nobody's ever going to see that for the most part. Nobody's going to see it, so they don't give a crap. And, rightfully so. Why would you spend a lot of time there when you want the outside to look pretty? You want people to imagine what's going on. And the worst part is when you own one of these things, you can't legally drive it on the street because it doesn't have a VIN. You can't title it if it doesn't have a VIN. If it doesn't have a VIN number, you can't title it, which is different than if you were to, say, do a kit car, because that one comes from a company that has registered their builds, basically, and come with what they call an MCO, a manufacturer certificate of origin. And they've gone through a bunch of legal hoops to basically become a car manufacturer. Okay, it doesn't really matter where it's built. They say, we've built this car and somebody else is going to build it and we're going to sell it to them, but the government just let us know that we build cars at such a low volume that we're going to create our own VINs. And they've jumped through all those hoops. The government says okay. They give them a little rubber stamp, and they're allowed to make their own cars with their own VIN number. Okay, Ford, Chevy, Toyota, all of them, every single one of them across the board, makes these purposefully because they don't want them to be VIN'd. They don't want them out there. Generally, they're just ideas, they're concepts, they're getting public reaction, they're getting all sorts of information as far as feedback from the public about what they should do, what they should not do, what direction they should go in, because they want people to react to it. That's the whole point of concept cars. And if you have a concept car that doesn't have a VIN or anything, they usually get crushed. That's the idea. They're just for ideas. They're just for the purpose of getting people to go, ooh, ah, that's nice, or I don't like that, I can't believe they went that direction, etc. Okay, so I did find an article on here about buying concept cars harder than it seems. I mean, most of them get crushed. That's the idea. The idea is for them to be built, and then they get thrown away. And usually, as I've, kind of reading through, another person's, version of this, they usually, if they get sold with crazy amounts of contractual obligations. I remember one time I went to I'll give you an example. After Porsche had won one of its I don't know how many Le Mans in a row, I went to a local Porsche dealership, and they had the car, the winning 918 car, and I go up there and I look at it, and it looks like it, but it's not the car. It's so obviously not the car, and I was really disappointed when you look at it, because the windows were all blacked out. There was no interior. They wouldn't. It didn't look like the body panels opened. There was no visible, markings on the car to let it know that it had ever been driven anywhere. It was just basically a shell that they were kind of parading around at these Porsche dealerships to say, "Oh, look, we've got a version of the car that raced there." And that, that was a concept car, and it really kind of, irked me a little bit. But there were some other cars there that were having fun too. But a lot of times, concept cars don't have interiors. For the longest time, the Ford GT just had a shell, and while they were using it as a race car, they never, interior was kind of an afterthought for them. So that's why it took so long to get the interior finished, because they were using it as a race car, and it was more of a race product at that point. And fine, I mean, no big deal, but that's kind of how concept cars work. And here's the deal. This is a concept car for Cadillac, right? It was a concept car, and they were just basically putting it out there to see what the public thought. Some of them do end up in the hands of collectors who seek concept cars or one-of-a-kind vehicles. Usually those buyers are museums or, super rich people who want, something rare that nobody else has. But the thing is they're not worth as much as people think they are, because they can't be driven on the street. They are not licensed to be used for what they're intended to be used for, which is to be driven on the street, okay? Most people who buy them, potential buyers want a full production version of the car, not a one-off collector's item that you'll never be able to fix. It would be just astronomical to be able to fix one of these things, because no body panels share anything else at all. According to purpose of the concept cars, to think big and get the money to do it, okay? So they want public support to go, yes, we want you to do this, okay? You're always looking 5 or 6 ahead in the future, and here's how they essentially do it. It's planned, modeled by some computers. Clay models are still made. They still do clay models, okay? They hold research clinics. If you remember GM's public testing, that's kind of similar to what they do, if you remember those commercials that they took down. They actually may build a car, and a concept makes the rounds to see what the public thinks. Very, very standard thing, okay? They're display objects. They're not actually functioning cars. They may roll and drive on and off just to make sure that they get to where they're supposed to, but they're not functioning. Just like this Ford Lightning concept doesn't have working grills, just like I pointed out. I mean, you could see it just by looking at it. Does it look neat? Yeah, it looks neat. Okay, cool. But that's the idea. The idea is just to look at it. And they're not worth what you think they're worth. People say, oh, they're one-off cars. Well, okay, but you can't use it. It's a museum piece. You just stare at it, okay? Concepts aren't sold that often because of liability. Yeah, these cars are not tested, and especially from a huge manufacturer like Ford, Chevy, or Toyota, Honda, whatever. They're not going to sell a concept prototype vehicle to anybody, because if you get hurt in that thing, they're liable, and they've got some pretty deep pockets, and guess who you're going to sue? So generally they get crushed. It's not worth the liability, and those who do get at have some, complicit, here we go, complicated contracts that keeps them from registering. So those of you who think you can just go buy one of these, get a VIN for it, and then put it on the road, ain't going to happen, okay? It just won't happen no matter how much you will it to be. I remember reading, some forums, well, you just get one of these concepts and get a VIN for it. Where are you going to get a VIN? Ask yourself, who's going to provide you that VIN number? Okay? Because when you walk up to the DMV, they're going to ask you for paperwork. Pretty standard. We need a title. We need a manufacturer certificate of origin. We need some paperwork that says that this is a street legal car. And you can't provide any, they ain't going to give it to you. I don't care who you are. So Volkswagen, for example, sold functional, less extreme concept cars to race teams simply to avoid smashing them. Totally cool. Right? Also called sometimes body and white cars. Very, very usual things. Very low production. Yeah, I mean, they're not going to do it. But, this person, for example, he's got 100 cars in his collection. And probably has a few of them, but I mean, insuring them, how would you insure it? You're insuring it like an art piece, like an Andy Warhol you'd store off your wall. Now, that's not to say that some concept cars have not gone for some crazy money, okay? 2 examples here. The 1963 Ford Thunderbird, $660,000, right? Very cool. I mean, this was cool stuff, but this is an extremely iconic car and kind of, one of, I'd say one of the cars that really kicked off everything. But back then they made concept cars that actually worked. So it's a little bit different. I think it's, I think the provenance and the age and a bunch of other factors that go into it makes this concept car pretty valuable, including the Oldsmobile F88, okay? That one also kicked off a huge revolution in the car world. So there is, it went for $3.3 million, and there's probably some good explanation as to why that happened. But for good reason. It stood for something. It represented an era, an icon, something. This Ford Lightning concept doesn't represent, at least right now, maybe 60 years in the future, time will tell. But right now, it doesn't represent diddly because they don't make Lightnings anymore. They make the Raptor, which is cool. I mean, it's a cool truck. But the guy selling it for $27,000. I read somewhere that he had bought it for $27,000 and is just trying to get out what he's got into it. But it's going to be a tough sell. It's going to be a tough sell to this thing. So I wish you luck. I'll put a link in the description. But I don't know. What do you think? Would you buy a concept car? I'm not sure I would, but let me know in the comments and have a good rest of the day.